So here's a video I didn't expect to make and that I'm not proud of making, but I need to react. I need to vent this or I'm going to scream. And this is going to be inflammatory for the views and to make people mad because I'm tired of people making me mad about this subject. Linux is not usable for professional video editing, for day-to-day video editing, for high-level hardware utilization, pounding the hardware and the software for high resolution and high performance video editing. It is not usable, period. The open source video editors are not capable. They are lacking so many features, so many compatibility issues, everything. The operating system itself is not up to the needs of it. Codec licensing is a nightmare for open source software and things like that. File system support for external cards, none of it's there. I have just wasted half of an entire goddamn workday trying to do what would have been basic and really neat to include in a video, which was benchmarking. It started as benchmarking Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve between Windows 10 and an Ubuntu variant for testing render times and timeline performance and things like that, because I figured if it was made and optimized for Linux, it would have a little less headroom or a little less overhead to work with and perform a little better, or maybe it'd perform the same, or maybe it'd perform worse. I'd like to test it. And then it turned into a 1080 Ti versus RTX 2080 benchmark, and so both of those should have been easy. I have spent hours ripping my hair out and dealing with some very patient people in our Linux chat in my Discord server, trying to solve the most bare bones issues. DPI scaling is just completely unusable in many cases on Linux distros. I switched to Kubuntu or Kubuntu for the KDE desktop environment, which everyone has said is much better for high DPI scaling. And granted, it looks very nice and pretty. However, it kept resetting my side monitor's resolution and scaling every time I logged into a new session or logged into my session, and then to apply scaling, you had to start your session over again, which meant it would undo it, which meant Windows were having issues. Every time I tried to take a screenshot of a region, it shifted my monitor over and screwed things up. And while I'm at it, check this out when I try to take a region screenshot. Take a new screenshot. Excuse me? What is over here? Nothing. It just like removes one of the desktops. What in the world? I couldn't mount my NAS because it wasn't cooperating with the file systems appropriately. That took hours trying to figure that out and get that mounted. Once I finally got that mounted, I couldn't access my external SSDs that I use for some of my cameras because exFAT isn't supported thanks to Microsoft, but I don't have a choice on using that because of my cameras. I'm not going to switch to open source cameras to do my work. That's not how the world works. I needed exFAT support. It did, however, mount my internal drives just fine, so that was cool. OBS, everyone said snap package is easier. I was in a rush. Install OBS from the snap package, and it's OBS version 0.0.1. Okay. Quickly uninstalled that. Try to install it from the repository. Instead, install the repository, and there were leftover files from the snap remove because I didn't run auto remove because whatever. Why? And then back and forth because OBS wouldn't install. Finally got OBS installed, and if I put OBS, actually pretty much in general, OBS could not sustain 4K 60 FPS recording of just a blank desktop in KDE Ubuntu, Kubuntu, be it because of the desktop environment being more graphically intense or some other reason, despite using NVENC and this being totally capable on much lesser hardware anyway, but definitely capable on this hardware. Speaking of hardware, Kubuntu or KDE or whatever refused to acknowledge that I had the correct graphics driver installed. Every time I selected and applied the NVIDIA driver, which was the latest driver for 10, it kept just reverting the UI to saying that it had the Nuvo open source driver installed, or active, which I kept thinking it did and kept trying to switch, even tried an older version, but then once I had it switched and pulled up the NVIDIA settings and the Xorg log both reflect the NVIDIA driver. So the UI for Kubuntu is just not cooperating there. Install Resolve. Resolve only has 2 activations, so I switched back to the free version. The free version doesn't support H.264 on Linux, probably because of some cost-saving measure for the licenses, which is just ridiculous. So then I had to go deactivate Resolve on another PC, come back, switch from the old version to Studio. Then it can't render to H.264, but fine, that would have been fine at that point. But Resolve just keeps crashing every few minutes for no apparent reason. Whether I'm selecting a folder, trying to relink a file, editing preferences, just keeps crashing to the desktop for no reason. By the way, on this Ubuntu installation, wherever there's a window open, that's where Windows just want to appear, despite not being my main monitor. So if I had OBS over here to record my main desktop, Resolve would open over here, but Resolve has no window border or window decoration, so I can't drag it over. What else have I run into? Resolve is just an unstable, unusable mess, and even when I was just trying to scrub footage, it's just like, oh, your graphics driver crapped out. Can't do anything about that. And it requires the proprietary driver, and it says it requires the most recent one. But again, for all the people who are pushing Resolve on Linux as a video editing option, because supposedly it's so good, Resolve is built for CentOS. It is built for pre-packaged production centers, basically. It is built for CentOS, and there is a third-party script you can use to rebuild the installation script into a proper Debian installation file, which is what I did, and then install it. However, the software itself doesn't work so hot, and up until the 15 beta, in the 14 and or earlier versions, you couldn't even play system sound. You had to have a Blackmagic Deck Link hardware device to get sound output. Now there's no H.264 support. It is an unusable mess. So those of you who are recommending these things, have you ever actually used them? Probably not. Have anyone who recommends Linux for these things ever actually used it? Probably not. Everyone likes to, or all these people like to insist that I don't know what I'm doing with Linux or that I have not enough experience with it. I've been using Linux off and on as a laptop and office operating system, which is most of what it's good at, that in development, for 20-something years, since the 90s. I grew up using Red Hat 5 alongside Windows 98. I used Ubuntu in the early 2000s. That's how I used most of my computers. I enjoyed GNOME 2. It was a blast. While I may not do a whole lot of advanced stuff simply because it doesn't meet my needs, I have used it. I know what the hell I'm doing. It doesn't work for these things. Speaking of video editors not being good enough, Resolve, again, very bad. Had someone else come in our Discord server who was very disappointed in Kdenlive because they just kept running into bugs, crashes, and other issues, and it just didn't meet their needs, despite the fact that they so very much wanted to, which is a story I hear time and time again. I'm trying to think of other things. I just issue after issue after issue of things that should just work. Oh, and in certain programs like Discord, my cursor, which is already not high enough DPI for a 4K screen, is really tiny on Discord and very hard to see. Minor thing, but all those things add up to just things where, why would I use Linux in this situation? At no point in this process, when literally every little thing I try to do, there's a roadblock, there's an issue, there's something that doesn't work, at no point is this a serviceable replacement for Windows. At no point does this replace Windows on my workstation, on my work PC, where I do my work day in and day out that I get paid for and am expected to uphold a turnaround time and a level of quality. At no point does it make sense to use Linux as a desktop operating system for that. I will continue to use it on my laptops for office stuff. It's where I like to write my scripts, do my emails, mess around on laptops where it doesn't matter what happens to them. And everybody jumping on it because of the 1809 update, the random file deletion of the 1809 update can happen anywhere. That is the importance of backup systems, because it can strike at any time. And in fact, I believe there was an Ubuntu and maybe even a Fedora update that wound up deleting stuff for people. It just happens. Windows has a bad history with Windows 10, but it's not the only situation where that happens. I'm pretty sure it's happened on Mac as well. I'm just done. I am fed up. I just wanted to include and be one of the first people to include some serious Linux Resolve coverage, because while Resolve has so many issues on its own as a NLE, and I don't think it is the right choice for most people at the moment, I wanted to support the only capable free option for the degree of work that I do that would be available on Linux, and I can't. It is nowhere worth my time anymore. Dealing with a couple botched updates when they come, when I know how to deal with them, is far much better, a better use of my time. Even having to reinstall Windows takes like an hour, and then I'm back up and running, little downtime to reconfigure things. I rarely have to do that. It's like once every year and a half. Far much better use of my time than dealing with anything like this involving Linux and video production. Oh, and OBS Studio. Did I mention? Yeah, I mentioned that it didn't install from Snap. I had to add the repository after all, and then that wouldn't work. And then again, it doesn't perform well for some reason. Who knows? Could be the desktop environment. I may return to this specific setup that I was trying to use on my main rig at some point in time with base Ubuntu, even though I was trying to get away from it for a few reasons and everyone said it was fine. And I realized that this is not entirely the fault of Linux itself or open source software, but rather the people who say things about it, the people who advocate for it, the evangelists that just blindly roll in and give recommendations. But I would expect if people are this elitist and this tech snobbery about their computers and about their operating system and their software to have a little bit of understanding or have a little bit of perspective as to what people's needs are before they say these things. But no, in the Linux world or in the internet people talking about things world of Linux, Linux is perfect, Linux is great, until you identify a situation where you can't use it, and the response every time to me is, why would you try to do that on Linux? Why would you want to do that on Linux? No, you can't do that on Linux. Linux isn't built for that. Open source software isn't built for that. You can't expect that. They're at a disadvantage. You need to tailor back your wants or expectations or needs. You just need to not do your job. I'm done. I am done. Period. I will still cover basic Linux coverage as I have for newbies on my channel, because I find that to be very valuable. That's one of the few kinds of Linux video content that makes a whole lot of sense, which is kind of funny since all the people who seemingly already know so much about Linux are the ones who go watch it, because once you get past the newbie stage on Linux, video content doesn't make a whole lot of sense outside of maybe benchmarks like I was trying. But other than the, hey, look, there's a new version, or hey, there's a cool tool I found while using it on my laptop, I'm done trying to support it for this stuff. I'm done playing ball with this community. I'm sorry. You're wrong. You clearly have no idea what my needs are. None of my hardware. I mean, some of my hardware. Okay. I have a very lengthy video discussion coming soon with my buddy Dylan about choosing a video editing platform and what's all involved with this, and it's a really good discussion. And despite all this, I'm really excited to share that as I get it edited up. But my needs for an operating system, for my work that I have to do day to day, I need a competent video editing workflow of multiple software suites, because I use Audition, After Effects, Premiere, Photoshop, Adobe Media Encoder, Resolve, other proprietary plugin suites and video encoding tools and Blackmagic proprietary codecs and raw codecs and ProRes codecs and things that there aren't licenses for on Linux. I need support for my hardware devices that I use day to day, support for my macros that I integrate into Premiere Pro that make me be able to edit how I can, support for 4K, DPI scaling to make it look usable, optimized hardware support for the beefy rigs that I have in the first place, which just isn't present. I need proxy support. I need color grading tools. I need so much that isn't present, and it's beyond. It's more than just, oh look, we got Kdenlive or OpenShot. You have a video editor, you can go. Well, yes, if I were stranded on a desert island and I absolutely had to life or death make a video, I could do it. But I could not make the videos that I make day to day in the quality, in the speed, in the at all sense that I do now on Linux right now. Haven't been able to in the past, can't right now, might at some point in the future. That time is not now, that time is not any time in the near future. Not so distant future, sure, possibly, but not now and not tomorrow. Maybe next year, and by next year we're talking 5 years, not literally next year. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, but it's not here, and I'm done considering it or playing ball with those who think I'm crazy for not doing it. Windows sucks, Windows 10 sucks, Microsoft's lack of QA team sucks. That's why people like me test the updates early so we can get this information out there. But it just doesn't make sense. It's not just an initial learning cost or transition cost. It just is not possible. And I'm tired of people telling me otherwise. And the inconsistencies really get me. I mentioned my exFAT drives weren't working on Ubuntu, so to cover my bases, I am trying Linux Mint and base Ubuntu on this system just to have an accurate sample of what's happening. The exFAT drives work fine on Linux Mint, so it's clearly not a Linux issue, but the fact that file system support of all things doesn't work out of box and is inconsistent when I kind of have to pick and choose between distros to get any aspect of things that I want is just not acceptable as an end user. It's fine for those who want to have their free time and their hobby dedicated to fixing their operating system, which is ironic given that operating system maintenance is the whole reason you would be trying to force everyone to move from Windows. But for those who just want to work, it's freaking stupid. And it got worse. I wouldn't have expected it, but I wanted to cover my butt in terms of making sure I did everything I could, and so I gave Linux Mint a try. And at first, despite a lot of headache initially getting set up, once I did eventually get Resolve working, it was actually rendering fairly quickly, and I was pretty excited, even though Resolve was just as unstable as on Ubuntu, and it kept crashing to the desktop with no errors at random points and whatever. I thought I had figured out the final piece. I kept getting an error 77 with regards to the GPU driver, which I thought, or I hypothesized, was being caused by the Blackmagic RAW codec. So I deleted that file from the project and went to and rebooted because it was no longer functioning after that weird GPU hiccup. And after that point, Resolve no longer started working. I tried installing a bunch of different things from support from those of you who were trying to be helpful on Twitter and Discord. We tried going through dependencies, reinstalling Resolve, doing a million different things, and the end result was my Cinnamon session just being completely broken. It just gave me a tiny little error in the middle of the screen with OK in lowercase, and I click it and couldn't boot it anymore. The install's just gone, and obviously there's ways to fix it, but at no point during any of this journey would any of this been a good use of my time. Thus far, Windows has not done anything that significantly wrong to have made any of this worth my time. Nor can I say it's worth yours if you're a video editor or content creator. Sure, the Linux gamer can make some videos on Linux. He makes videos very infrequently. He uses very basic needs. He has some gameplay capture and a webcam and an analog microphone. I'm not going to negatively speak about the quality of his videos, but his needs are on a very much lower tier than mine. Other than that, there's no one doing what I do on Linux with what's available without Pixar's in-house developed tools or whatever. It's not there. It's not going to be there for a while. And I'm done listening to it. I'm done hearing about it. I'm done feeling like I'm doing something wrong. I've tried multiple distros. I've tried multiple different setups and configurations. Every time I try to do stuff related to content creation, it just ends in me being so completely miserable and never getting what I want. And to end this, I'm going to include a quote from John Prosser's Why I Left Android video, which I think very much kind of expresses what I'm trying to convey here. And you can go check out the full video linked in the description.
But John, you can customize it. You can make it any way you want it. Yeah. Fuck off. The solutions to the problems with the software, problems with the hardware should never, ever have to be answered by me, the consumer. The burden should never be placed on the consumer.